Welcome to Wise Women Wednesday with the Brava Women Networking Group. We've got the great pleasure of introducing Naomi Anderson from Aged Care Ready, who will be presenting today. So Naomi Anderson is a seasoned professional in the aged care sector, bringing 17 years of experience into her role as the Director of Aged Care Ready. As a registered nurse, her expertise is grounded in practical, hands-on experience. Naomi's passion lies in assisting families to navigate the complexities of the aged care space, providing them with the guidance and support they need. Her unique blend of nursing experience and leadership in aged care makes her an invaluable resource to those seeking to understand and access aged care services. Today, Naomi will be covering the signs and symptoms your aging parents need support, available services to keep your loved ones at home longer, and how to start the aged care conversation. Over to you, Naomi.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that. Amazing. Let me just present. Amazing. Thanks, Dia. So as Dia said, my name is Naomi Anderson and I'm the director of a company called Aged Care Ready. We assist our elderly clients and their families navigate this really complex space. And like she said, I'm a registered nurse. And today we're talking about recognizing the signs that your elderly parent needs some help, what help is available, and starting the conversation. So today, first off, I'll start with the signs and symptoms. And I think it's really easy to be a little bit too close to the situation sometimes. So when you have an aging loved one, you may not notice these small changes unless you haven't seen them in a little while. And it's a bit like the frog in the boiling pot situation. It happens gradually over time, and until you actually, step back and have a look with fresh eyes, that a lot of the time that families don't actually notice these things. And that's totally okay. That's very normal. So I'll talk about a couple of non-verbal and also verbal signs and symptoms that mum and dad need help. So non-verbal is really one of the first things you would probably notice is in their appearance. So where they may have been quite well presented in the past, and then all of a sudden they're probably not tending to their hygiene as much, or they're re-wearing more clothes, or they're just looking a little bit more disheveled. They're not able to maintain the home as well as they used to, and that could be anything from cleaning to doing their ironing, the way that they organize themselves as well. They may be forgetting to pay their bills or getting a little bit more overwhelmed with the financial side of things, or even, piles of letters that they haven't opened because it's just a little bit too complex for them now. So the next one is their diet and their weight. If you've noticed a decline in their weight, or they look like they've lost some weight, or you feel that they're probably not eating as well as they used to, you may have brought some food around for them and you notice that it hasn't been eaten, or it's been stored incorrectly as well. And then lastly, in the non-verbal section, is the social aspect as well. So are they withdrawing from their usual activities? Have you had some conversations with some of their friends and their peers, or even their neighbours, that something feels a little bit off and it's not quite right? In terms of the verbal side of things and signs and symptoms that you could be noticing, is their forgetfulness. So if they're having, repetitive conversations, or they're forgetting appointments, or saying things like, "You never told me this," and getting a little agitated almost, that they feel like you're saying something that's not true when in fact they've just forgotten. They could be confused as well, particularly in the afternoons. And, thinking that they're in a different place to what they actually are. So if they're at home, they may be thinking they're in somebody else's home. This is probably most prevalent when they're outside of their usual environment. So it could be more that they're out and about, or they're at somebody else's home and they're quite unsure of where they are or how to find a certain room in the house and things like that. Multiple contacts. So that means multiple phone calls, usually to family members, even if they have already spoken to you that day, and then they continually call, even if it's for the same type of conversation. They're not too distressed about it, but they've just forgotten that they have already spoken to family. And then the other one is word finding difficulties. So they may not be able to find the correct words to use, or they're using the incorrect words to describe things and things like that. So what help and support is actually available? Today, we'll really be focusing on the home support side of things, because ultimately the best place for somebody to be in is in their own home, as long as it's safe to do so, and also that they're well supported. So the first one is the Commonwealth Home Support Program, or CHSP. That is subsidised help through the regional or local services. Sometimes this gets called council supports. And not to go too deep into it, but it's not actually just council support. It is other local companies that also pick up these tenders as well. So that's where, really low care type of supports, like your cleaning, your social support, your gardening, that sort of thing. And again, these are subsidized. So instead of paying $50 or $60 an hour for a cleaner, they may pay $10 or $12 an hour. And then after that, you've got your home care packages, and that is federally funded. So that is probably a little bit more high care, and that you have to go through the aged care assessment service to have that assessed and allocated. These are the ones that actually take a little while to get funded. And, people say that it could take a couple of years to get funded, and the wait times aren't that long now. But depending on their level of need, they will be funded anywhere from level 1 to 4, which could be anything from about $9,000 to $59,000 a year. And then they actually have the choice as to which company manages that service for them, or they can self-manage that, or family can self-manage that. Whereas with CHSP, you're pretty much just given the only options that are in the local area. And then, of course, you've got your respite and your permanent aged care as well. To keep somebody in their own home for as long as possible, we highly recommend that you utilize regular respite, not just when things are, a bit pear-shaped, or the person caring for that person is at their wit's end and completely care fatigued. So we recommend at least having one bout of respite every, say, 3 months. You get 63 days of respite per year, so you may as well utilize that. And what I will say about respite is that respite is actually created for the carer, not for the elderly person. So how do we actually start this conversation? If you're anything like my family or families that we've come across, a lot of the time the elderly person doesn't want to even begin talking about this. And that's completely normal, because a lot of the time they are almost in denial, or don't actually have the insight to know that something's not quite right anymore. So the way that we put it into a bit of context is that to be part of this decision-making process, it's really, really important to start the conversation sooner than they feel that they need to, because there's nothing worse than coming into a crisis situation and then that person can no longer speak for themselves, and the family is then having the burden of responsibility to make these choices for their elderly loved ones with no context, no pre-conversation around this situation beforehand. So the biggest thing, I guess, you know, why these people don't want to have the conversation is because they feel like they don't have control over the situation, and that there's this underlying fear that they're just going to be placed into an aged care facility and they're not going to have a say in anything. They're going to lose their independence. So it's really important to bring it back and say, well, actually, you need to be part of this process. You still have a choice. And by having that conversation, it means that we can help you and support you, because there is funding and support available to keep you at home. And then in that situation, you know, you can discuss their wants and their needs. And most of the time they're going to say, I want to stay home till I die. And we all know that's not always possible, but let's try and put the supports in place to keep them at home for as long as possible. And then we have the decision-making capacity as well. So making sure that they have their powers of attorney in place, their medical decision-making powers, paperwork as well, because a lot of the time people need to transition into care because they no longer have that decision-making capacity. So starting that conversation earlier than you need to is definitely a positive thing. And that's it from my point of view. So if there's any questions, I'd love to take them, because I think that's probably where you're going to get the most benefit out of me.
Thanks, Naomi. That's brilliant. And I'll put the links down below of how you can contact Naomi. But thank you very much. It was fantastic.